After decades of hard work, I finally reached retirement. The day I left the company, I came home feeling light and free, practically humming as I walked through the door. I couldn't wait to pull out my bank card and take a good look at the savings I'd built over a lifetime, ready to start planning the peaceful, comfortable retirement I thought I'd earned. But the moment I saw the account balance, I froze. There was only $15,000 left. I stood there in stunned silence, my mind struggling to make sense of it. Maybe it was a glitch, a mistake in the system, something easily explained. I rushed to the bank and asked the teller to print out a transaction history for the past 5 years. What I saw only deepened the shock. Every single month, without fail, $3,000 had been withdrawn. Like clockwork. My monthly salary was $8,000. And with Lewis's pension added in, I had always assumed we were in good shape. More than enough to live comfortably in our golden years. But reality didn't just slap me in the face. It knocked the wind out of me. My head spinning with questions, I went home and dug out Lewis's old ledger. He'd kept the household finances ever since we got married. It was one of his quirks. Meticulous records, every penny tracked. I'd never questioned it. I trusted him completely. I never thought I needed to look that closely. But now I had no choice. Every entry in that ledger was neatly written, down to the last cent. And what I discovered left me numb. Those monthly transfers hadn't started 5 years ago. They'd been going on for 30 years. What began as $500 a month had gradually grown to $3,000. Month after month. Year after year. Without interruption. And then I saw it. One small note scribbled in the margin next to the transaction line. Living expenses for Bianca and the kids. My mind went blank. For 30 years he had told me to cut back, to be frugal, to save for retirement. And all this time he was using my money to support his mistress and her children. I stood in the middle of the study, still holding the ledger in my hand, feeling like the punchline to a cruel joke. After nearly 40 years of loyal service at Smith Home Services, I finally made it to retirement. The moment I stepped out of the office on my last day, I headed straight to the bank, my debit card clutched in hand. It felt like the first official step into my new chapter. Finally, a life of rest, freedom, and maybe even a few adventures. My salary had always been solid, $8,000 a month. Add in Lewis's pension and we should have had a sizable nest egg by now. As I walked to the bank, my steps felt lighter than usual. I was already imagining a stop by a travel agency afterward. Maybe start planning a summer getaway to Lake Tahoe or the coast of Maine. But when I saw the account balance, I stopped breathing for a second. There was only $15,000 left. I thought I must have read it wrong. My hands were trembling as I walked to the counter. "Ma'am," the teller said gently, "this account shows a recurring monthly transfer of $3,000. The current balance is accurate." A sharp pain clenched in my chest. My knees almost buckled, and if it hadn't been for a kind stranger nearby who caught my elbow, I might have collapsed right there. I forced myself to stay composed and asked the teller to print a full transaction record for the past 5 years. The pages came out one by one, each one confirming the same gut-wrenching truth. $3,000 withdrawn every month without fail. Not a single one missed. The moment my paycheck hit the account, the money was already on its way out. 4 years I had deposited my salary into our joint account without a second thought. I never once questioned it. I never thought Lewis would touch that money without telling me. A rough estimate told me the truth was even worse. Just in the past 5 years, $180,000 had vanished. And if those transfers had been going on for 30 years, the total easily topped $1 million. I could feel myself unraveling. I didn't want to believe the worst of him. I didn't want to go there. But how could I trust him again after this? How could I pretend this wasn't betrayal? I left the bank and flagged down a cab, my mind in chaos the whole ride home. The moment I walked through the front door, I went straight to Lewis's study. He'd always kept old-school ledgers, handwritten, every dollar accounted for. He'd been doing it since his 20s. I used to think it was a sweet, reliable habit. A sign of how much he cared about our home, our life. But now it felt like a convenient way to hide the truth. I opened the ledger and the tears started before I even turned the second page. There it was. Monthly withdrawals, $3,000 each, recorded diligently for 30 years. Not a single gap. And next to the most recent entry, he'd scribbled a note in the margin. Living allowance, Bianca and the kids. I went cold. Bianca Myers. The name cut through me like a rusted blade, slow and jagged, slicing through the deepest part of my trust. She was the woman Louis had once been infatuated with. We all grew up on the same block. Bianca was the kind of girl who commanded attention. Beautiful, bold, always standing in the spotlight. Louis, on the other hand, had been quiet and reserved. The kind of guy someone like Bianca wouldn't even glance at twice. He liked fireworks and drama. There was always a crowd around her, men trying to impress her. But then she got pregnant. No ring, no father in sight. And those admirers disappeared just as fast as they'd come. And Louis, he offered to pick up the pieces. Even when she never truly cared for him. Even when she looked right past him. He still held on. He still put her and her child first for decades. I'd always assumed it was just a harmless old crush, some foolishness from his youth. But it wasn't just a memory he tucked away. It was a commitment he never let go of. All these years he told me we needed to be frugal, warned me about the financial strain of retirement, urged me to be careful with spending. And I listened. I cut back. I tightened our budget. I believed he was doing it for us, for our future. But now I knew the truth. Every penny I saved was funneled into another woman's life. And her child's. I stood in the middle of the study, clutching the ledger, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. And then somewhere between the tears I laughed. Not a laugh of humor. A laugh of bitter realization. I was the joke. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting in the study, staring at nothing, my thoughts a tangled mess. It wasn't until I heard the jingle of keys and the front door creak open that I finally snapped out of it. Louis walked in and spotted me right away, standing in his study, ledger still in my hand. His expression darkened instantly. "What the hell are you doing in here without my permission?" he barked, his tone sharp, accusatory. I didn't answer. I tossed the ledger at him, letting it hit the floor near his feet. "Don't you think it's time you explained this?" There was a flicker of panic in his eyes, but he quickly tried to mask it. He adjusted his glasses and snatched the ledger off the floor, clutching it tightly to his chest like it was something sacred. "Stella, this is outrageous," he snapped coldly. "This is my personal record. Who gave you the right to go snooping?" That was the moment it hit me, crystal clear. All these years I wasn't a partner. I was a walking ATM. I'd worked myself to the bone, bringing in paycheck after paycheck, only for him to secretly funnel that money to support his old flame, and her children. And now, standing in front of me, he had the audacity to act like I was the one out of line. I stepped toward him, eyes locked on his face, and slapped him hard across the cheek. He staggered back in disbelief, stunned, silent. I had never hit him before, not once. I had always been the gentle one, the one who smoothed things over. That slap was decades of betrayal finally boiling to the surface. Seconds passed before he exploded. "You're insane. Have you lost your mind? How dare you hit me? We're married, your money is my money. What's the big deal if I spent some of it?" I stared at him, at the arrogant twist of his mouth, the entitlement in his voice, and I realized I didn't even recognize this man anymore. "Louis, if you're still hung up on Bianca, just say it. Don't insult me with this living allowance bullshit. This isn't charity, it's a damn affair in disguise." He shrugged, completely unfazed. "Bianca's an old friend. She's had a rough life. I was just helping out. That's all." His voice was casual and different. But every word felt like a knife. "Helping out." I laughed bitterly. "With my money? You were helping your old flame and her kid live comfortably while I was pinching pennies, denying myself everything. I wouldn't even buy a decent pair of shoes, and you were showering her with money behind my back." The fury I'd held in for so long finally broke loose. I couldn't hold back anymore. My voice rose, sharp and shaking. "You let me live like we were barely scraping by while you played secret benefactor to the woman you couldn't let go of. You told me to be frugal, for our future. But all along, you were just funneling my sacrifices to someone else." Louis fell silent, staring at me like I'd wounded him. "Stella," he said softly as if trying to sound hurt, "we've been married for decades. Is this really how little you think of me?" His voice was meant to guilt me, but it only made me feel sick. I remembered all the times I tried to protect his ego. When we were younger, he made less money than I did, and it ate at him. He was proud, fragile in his pride. So I let him handle the finances, thinking I was giving him a sense of control, a sense of dignity. But in the end, what I gave him wasn't dignity, it was opportunity. And he used it to betray me. I took a deep breath, voice trembling now. Do you remember when Matt was 10 and he fell down the stairs? He broke his leg, needed surgery. He furrowed his brow, said nothing. I begged you to pull out some savings to cover the medical bills, but you refused. Said the money was in a fixed-term deposit. Said it couldn't be touched. You told me to go borrow from neighbors, colleagues, anyone who'd help. Tears welled in my eyes again. That night, I knocked on door after door in a freezing storm, begging people to lend us money, while you were hoarding cash to raise her child. My fingertips were numb, but my heart felt like it was on fire. I looked him dead in the eye and said word by word, you used my money to support another woman. That disgusts me. Lewis's face twisted. He gasped suddenly, his hand clutching his chest. He stumbled backward, his legs giving way beneath him, and collapsed onto the floor. I froze. For a second, everything around me went silent. Just me, him, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end I couldn't walk away. I knelt down and helped him up. No matter how deeply my heart had been shattered, we had shared 40 years of life together. I just couldn't bring myself to be completely indifferent. I took him to the hospital. After the doctors completed the initial examinations and arranged for further tests, I stepped out and called Matt. I told him to come and take care of his father. Then I turned around and walked out of the hospital, alone. I couldn't stand to look at Lewis anymore. Back home, the house felt oppressively quiet. The ticking of the clock in the living room echoed through the stillness, each second landing like a cold drop of water in an empty room. 40 years of marriage, undone by a ledger and a few handwritten notes. I thought back to the early days with Lewis. He wasn't a bad man. He was kind, even gentle in his own way. His only real flaw, if you could even call it that, was his stinginess. But stingy doesn't quite capture it. It was deep-rooted, obsessive frugality, almost pathological. I remembered one particular winter years ago. He bought huge sacks of potatoes and carrots just to save a few extra bucks. Even when the potatoes started sprouting, he refused to throw them out, said I could just cut around the bad parts and they'd be fine. That winter, I ended up in the emergency room with a serious case of food poisoning. Even then, I tried to reason with him, tried to be kind. We've got some savings, I said. We don't have to live like this. But he brushed it off, murmuring vague excuses about preparing for the future, always